made decisions in the budget last year to increase taxes by £40 billion. I have absolutely no intention of repeating a budget on that scale again. That budget was absolutely necessary because the previous government left a £22 billion black hole in the public finances, not some year in the future, but in the fiscal year we're in. They had already spent the reserves set aside for genuine emergencies 3 times over, just 3 months into the financial year. So I had to take immediate action, both to put our public finances on a firm footing and also to ensure that our public services that had been committed funding, but that money hadn't been made available, to make sure that they could continue to function. We will be increasing spending on police in the spending review next week, so that's not a decision that or a choice that I would recommend.
I made the choice to means test the winter fuel payment so that it's only targeted at those most in need. I know that not everyone in this hall or in the country will agree with every decision that I make. But I will not duck those decisions. Not for political expediency, not for personal advantage. Faced with that £22 billion black hole that the Conservatives left this year, and with a triple lock ensuring that the state pension will rise by an estimated £1,700 over the course of this Parliament, I judged it the right decision in the circumstances that we inherit.
There's something oddly satisfying about watching a politician stumble over their own policy decisions, especially when that slip turns into a full-blown faceplant in Parliament. That's exactly what happened to Chancellor Rachel Reeves, who tried to backtrack on her controversial winter fuel cuts and somehow present it as a masterstroke of economic strategy. But the real showstopper came when Helen Whately stepped up, not merely to question the move, but to dismantle it in front of the entire chamber. This wasn't just a disagreement, it was a political ambush.
So I had to make decisions last year to restore sound public finances, and that involved a number of difficult decisions around welfare, taxation, and also public spending, including the decision to means test winter fuel payments, so only the poorest pensioners, those on pension credit, got it. But we have now put our public finances on a firmer footing. The economy is in a better shape, but we have also listened to the concerns that people had about the level of the means test. And so we will be making changes to that. They will be in place so that pensioners are paid this coming winter, and we'll announce the detail of that and the level of that as soon as we possibly can. But people should be in no doubt that the means test will increase and people will get more people will get winter fuel payment this winter.
Rachel Reeves had slashed winter fuel payments last year, affecting millions of pensioners. At the time, the justification was fiscal discipline. Now, without warning, she is restoring them and trying to frame the move as a sign of economic strength. That pivot raised more eyebrows than support. Helen Whately seized the moment with surgical precision, calling out the sudden reversal and forcing Reeves to squirm under pressure. With cameras rolling and MPs murmuring, the Chancellor's confident U-turn quickly turned into a public spectacle, one she clearly didn't see coming. Reeves' reversal on winter fuel payments wasn't just a quiet policy shift. It was a political earthquake, and everyone in Parliament felt the tremors. After months of insisting that cutting support was a tough but necessary decision, she suddenly unveiled a new plan promising fuel help for 9 million pensioners. The timing could hardly have been worse. Public trust was already fragile, and now she was presenting a U-turn without any admission of fault.
I feel for the honourable gentleman sent here today by his bosses to complete what must be the most humiliating climb down a government has ever faced in its first year in office. Well, today, Madam Deputy Speaker, he has been sent to end that courageous last stand. And, unless it's coming next, he has been sent without the one thing that pensioners up and down the country deserve, an apology. Yeah. Let's be clear. The government made a choice to cut the winter fuel payment. It is outrageous to claim that the economy has somehow improved from the day they made the cut, and they know it. In fact, by almost every metric, the opposite is true. Inflation was at the 2% target. Now it's 1.5 points higher. 150,000 more people are unemployed. Growth forecasts have been slashed in half by the OBR. And in the meantime, they've gone to town with the country's credit card. Borrowing is up. Debt is up. Who is the Chancellor trying to fool when she says she can suddenly afford this when before she couldn't? The fact is, last winter, she gave pensioners fuel money to the unions. Now she realises how unpopular that was. Right. So she's pretending everything has changed. Perhaps the most surprising thing is she thinks anyone is taken in. 50,000 pensioners plunged into poverty this year, according to their own analysis. 100,000 extra pensioners ended up in A&E this winter. Their mistake has hurt people, and it is cowardly not to own up to it.
To make matters worse, Rachel Reeves didn't simply reinstate the payments. She presented the move as proof that Labour had strengthened the economy. It was a kind of spin that defies logic, like taking credit for rebuilding a house you helped tear down. The gap between the narrative and lived reality was glaring, and Helen Whately wasn't about to let it pass. By the time she rose to speak, the air was already thick with tension. What followed wasn't just political criticism, it was demolition. Helen Whately didn't come to grandstand. She came armed with receipts. Instead of hiding behind party slogans or cheap shots, she focused on something that doesn't lie: numbers. One by one, she unpacked the government's economic record like a prosecutor presenting evidence in court. Inflation remains stubborn at 2.8%. Unemployment is edging higher, now at 4.5%. Government borrowing has surged to £148 billion, £17 billion more than last year. Growth forecasts have been cut. That's not fiscal control. It's a warning light flashing red. What made it especially brutal was how calmly she delivered the takedown. No shouting, no theatrics, just cold, undeniable facts that made Labour's economic claims look more like fantasy than a serious fiscal plan. You could almost feel the oxygen leave the room.
A new mattress. Unwrap it, see how it feels, sleep on it for a while, but if it causes a political backache, send it back. This rushed reversal raises as many questions as it answers. It's clear that when the Prime Minister stood up and made his big U-turn announcement in PMQs, he had no plan and no idea how he was going to pay for it. It's a totally unfunded spending commitment. Where is the £1.25 billion needed to pay for this U-turn coming from? I note that the Minister has kicked that can down the road until the budget. They claim it won't permanently add to borrowing. So does this mean it will permanently add to taxation? And on the plan itself, is this really the best system of means testing they could come up with? Is he sure they have thought it through? Or is this going to unravel too? What happens if a pensioner earns over...
And all this unfolded while Rachel Reeves sat just meters away, boxed in by a reality she couldn't spin. What turned Helen Whately's attack into a knockout blow wasn't only her command of the economic data. It was her ability to connect those numbers to real people. She refused to let the debate stay buried in spreadsheets and forecasts. She brought it back to pensioners who spent last winter in freezing flats, to families who watched their elderly relatives struggle, and to the 50,000 pushed deeper into poverty by what she called reckless budgeting. She highlighted the ripple effects of bad policy. More than 100,000 additional A&E admissions, not because of a new virus or natural disaster, but because thousands couldn't afford to stay warm. That's not an accounting error. It's a humanitarian failure. While Reeves tried to present the U-turn as recovery, Whately was laying out the damage already done. Her message was unmistakable. These are not just policy choices, they are moral choices, and the government got them badly wrong. What made Whately's critique cut so deeply was that it didn't stop at the winter fuel reversal. She framed it as part of a much larger problem, a government that appears to be flying blind. Labour didn't just mishandle one policy. According to her argument, they entered office without a clear roadmap, and the cracks are beginning to show. Instead of rolling out well-developed plans from their time in opposition, they've been scrambling to repair their own missteps in real time. Whately portrayed it as a government improvising on the job, rewriting policies after implementing them. The result: confusion, mixed signals, and rising public frustration.
£35,000 a year through non-taxable income are they going to have to register for self-assessment and start filling out a tax return in their 80s or 90s? But if not, why should someone earning taxed income who didn't be disadvantaged? Is it fair that a millionaire pensioner and their spouse might receive a payment, but two people earning £36,000 won't? And what happens if someone dies in the period between receiving the payment and having to pay it back? Are they going to go after the deceased person's relatives? And two final questions, Madam Deputy Speaker. After all this, the savings for the Treasury this coming year may be as little as £50 million. Does he think it's worth it, and will he apologise?
Minister Bell.
Her argument was never just about mismanagement. It was about trust. If Labour's economic team can't stick to its own strategy for more than a few months, where exactly are they steering the country? That kind of uncertainty unsettles both markets and voters. To fully drive the point home, Whately didn't limit herself to Labour's failures. She emphasized the clear contrast in approach. The Conservatives, she acknowledged, had also faced difficult choices on winter fuel payments. But the difference, she argued, was in how those decisions were handled. Thoughtfully, cautiously, and with a clear plan, she admitted that extending support to wealthy pensioners might not be perfect. Yet, instead of tearing up the system overnight, her party pushed for reform, not chaos. That comparison hit hard because it made Labour's mistake look not just clumsy, but careless. Whately portrayed Labour's decision-making as surgery with a sledgehammer, brutal, rushed, and almost certain to cause collateral damage. The end result was a policy mess and a public relations disaster, all while ordinary people paid the price. By framing the issue around responsibility rather than ideology, she effectively boxed Labour in. The debate wasn't about left versus right. It was about whether the government had the basic competence to manage the fundamentals. When the Labour Party won power, it presented itself as the grown-ups in the room, the party that would clear up conservative chaos, balance the books, and govern like seasoned professionals. Whately exposed the hollowness of that promise with striking clarity. Instead of cleaning up the mess, Labour has begun creating its own, and at a pace few expected. The winter fuel fiasco is not some minor slip. It is a warning sign that their carefully built narrative of competence is starting to buckle under mounting pressure.
This measure was so urgent that pensioners had to be left in the cold. So can the Chancellor confirm categorically that there will be no additional borrowing to pay for this chaotic reversal? And if this is the case, can she explain how on earth it can be paid for without raising taxes? And can the Right Honourable Lady explain why last summer, apparently to avoid a run on the pound, Mr. Speaker, this measure was so urgent that pensioners had to be left in the cold over the last winter? What exactly has changed? Because it certainly hasn't been made possible by an improvement in the economy or the public finance.
Whately compared it to hiring a professional cleaner only to return home and find the house on fire. The image stuck because it perfectly captured the absurdity of the moment. The public expected stability. Instead, they saw a chancellor reversing course while insisting it was all part of the plan. The harder Labour tries to polish the optics, the more visible the cracks become. And Whately made sure none of those cracks were missed. She didn't stop with Labour's latest decisions. She widened the lens and pointed to an economic dashboard flashing red. Unemployment is projected to peak at 4.5% in 2025. Inflation is expected to climb again, reaching 3.8% by July. Even the International Monetary Fund has cut the UK's growth forecast from 1.6% to just 1.1%. These aren't abstract forecasts. They are the kind of numbers that shake households, stall businesses, and unsettle investor confidence. Yet Labour continues to insist the economy is under control as if these figures aren't staring them in the face. Whately framed it with blunt clarity. You cannot claim to be a skilled sailor while your ship is visibly sinking. No amount of political spin can seal holes in the hull. This isn't only a credibility problem, it's a reality problem. And labor, she argued, appears dangerously disconnected from both. Her dismantling of labor did not rely on party slogans or tribal attacks. What made it land was her focus on facts, solid, uncomfortable, and difficult to dismiss. She wasn't pushing ideology. She was pointing to hard numbers and real-world consequences everyone in the chamber could see. Inflation rising, growth stalling, pensioners struggling, hospitals under pressure. The evidence was there, and labor had no convincing answers. That is why it cut so deeply. This wasn't theater designed for applause. It was a grounded, data-driven indictment of failure. Even labor backbenchers could not easily ignore it. Some have already begun quietly distancing themselves from their party's policies. That signals more than routine disagreement. It points to growing dysfunction. When your own MPs start stepping back from your decisions, something is seriously wrong. Whately's takedown was not just a parliamentary win. It was a warning shot for a government already wobbling under the weight of its promises. By the end of the exchange, Rachel Reeves was no longer defending policy. She was avoiding accountability. What began as a confident claim of economic strength had shrunk into a defensive retreat. When she finally left the chamber, the optics spoke volumes. A visibly shaken chancellor walking away as questions continued to fly. Whately did not need to shout or grandstand. Her impact came from cutting through the noise with precision and calm authority. What she delivered was more than criticism. It was a full exposure of a government claiming control while clearly losing its grip. The winter fuel U-turn was meant to be a reset. Instead, it has become a symbol of confusion, hesitation, and an increasingly fragile hold on power. It is the kind of political moment that lingers in public memory, especially for the millions who felt the consequences firsthand. And if this is Labor's version of competence, many across the country have every reason to feel concerned.